sewed on this piping that runs around the bottom of the wing chair. Last time I showed you how to pin it. And this just gives me a guide to put the skirt on. And the reason why I sew the piping on ahead of time is so that I don't have to pin the skirt. Now, if you're doing something that's like a standard pleat or maybe a kick pleat just on the corners or something like that, then you might have to pin it ahead of time. Also, if, I don't know, I think there are two different kinds of people. Some people like to pin everything and sew it, and then there are those of us who want to do as little pinning as possible, and that's me. I fall in that camp. So if I don't have to pin something that I'm ruffling, then I won't. I'll just ruffle it as I sew it and just like trust that it all works out. And it usually does. So I'm using another hemp sheet for the skirt, and I'm definitely not going to need to use all of this. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to cut off the edges because the edges are already hemmed, and that way, again, it sort of saves me time. I don't have to hem anything. If you do have to, like if you're working with a fabric that doesn't have an edge on it, a hemmed edge or a finished edge, then you'll want to hem this piece that we're cutting for the skirt ahead of time so that you have a finished edge. So I want the skirt to have around maybe a 3.5 inch drop or so. So I'm going to measure off 4 inches, and I'm using a clear quilting ruler to do that. I find that these are just the absolute best rulers to use while you're sewing. I'll have to share some of my favorite tools. We were just talking about my favorite scissors. These scissors are they're like gold when you're sewing. Okay, so I'm going across the whole run of these hemp sheets. That's one reason why I really like working with these, because I have this raw edge, this finished edge to work with. And when you work with fabric, you've got the raw edge, you gotta sew more, you have to actually hem stuff. Okay, so I'm marking off 4 inches. And this is about 4 inches because the seam is just a little bit crooked. Again, this is an antique, it's handmade, and then I'm going to cut out the strip. So since I'm not pinning it ahead of time and I'm not doing a whole heck of a lot of measuring or anything, I've done enough of these slip covers to sort of estimate how much I need to make the skirt. If you're going to measure and figure out how much you need, the rule of thumb is you need at least 1.5 times the diameter of the chair. So you take all 4 sides of the chair, add them together, and you want to have at least 1.5 times that. I like to have at least double that because if I'm going to do a ruffle, I want it to be full and to really, I just want it to be full. I don't want to, sort of a skimpy looking skirt. No skimpy skirts, ladies. Gosh, I'm in a mood today. I swear I don't drink coffee or anything. Okay. Another nice thing about working with drop cloths actually is because they already have a finished hemmed edge as well. So if you're working with drop cloths, you can get away with this method too, to just cut off the hemmed edge and use that for the skirt. And now, since I have a bunch of individual little strips, I'm going to pin and sew them together so I have one long run that I can use for the skirt to go all the way around the chair. So this is the very bottom of the slip cover, and this is that piece of piping that I just sewed on to run the skirt along. The skirt is, so I've got the right side of the slip cover facing up and the right side of the skirt facing down. So again, all the raw edges are facing the same direction. And this is the no pin method. So if you're freaked out by this, then just go ahead and pin and then sew it, and that's fine. So I'm putting it in the machine here, and then I'm just going to pinch it and pleat it as I sew. And because we're doing like a ruffle, it doesn't have to be perfectly the same. Like, it's okay. If you're doing a pleat that needs to be uniform, then you'll want to pin it ahead of time. But if you're just doing a ruffle, it can be a little bit more freeform, and that's okay. And my estimating here was almost perfect. I do need to cut just a little bit off. And I'm just going to kind of roll the end under so I don't have the raw edge at the end. Sort of make the rest of this fabric work. Like I said, I've done this so many times, I just sort of know roughly how much fabric I'll need for the skirt. Just sort of, I can just guesstimate it. All right, and our skirt is on. We have our pretty skirt on, and the body of the slipcover is almost done. Yay! I always get excited at this part when I'm putting on the ribbons and all. So all we have to do is the ties and the cushion, and it's done. So I like to start at the bottom to get the skirt pulled on nice and tight, and then I'll work my way up. But I'm going to put about 3 ties, so it'll be 6 ribbons total. 3 ties onto the chair, and this is going to be to sort of deal with this flapping and make it so the slipcover fits on nice and tight, and then you can undo the ties when you need to wash the slipcover. So I'm using these, it's sort of a grosgrain ribbon, but it has this blue striping on it. It almost looks like a miniature version of upholstery webbing. And my mom likes blue, and we do have some of this tan color in the room, so I decided to go ahead and use these. This chair is going to be in the corner of the room, so you're really not going to see the ties, but I like to make it a nice little feature anyway. It may be moved at some point. So I've cut a ribbon to, I'd say this is about 2 feet, maybe 22 to 24 inches. And I have, I'm going to start at the bottom here. I fold the ribbon over about 1 inch just to hide that raw edge, and then pin it onto the slipcover where you want to sew it. And then I'm going to pull the slipcover tight and figure out, sort of hold my finger where I want to pin the ribbon that it's going to meet up with. And same thing, I'm going to fold it under about 1 inch. And pin it into place. pinning it, you have to pin it. Because if you can get away with not pinning it, then that's what I'll do. But you need to pin this in place to make sure that everything's even, that there's no gapping once the ribbons are tied. And you want to make sure the ribbons line up. So there we go. So I'm going to take this over to the machine and sew these on. We're going to sew going forward first and leave the needle in the ribbon and turn it to sew down this side. Basically, we're going to sew a square and then we're going to sew some zigzags in it. So we're going to sew down, do the same thing, stop, and you want to stop with the needle inside the fabric so that it stays put. We're going to put the foot down, I'm going to sew backwards. And then one last time for this last side. Okay, so you see I've just sewn this square, and then just to give it a little bit of extra stability, I'm going to sew zigzags in between the square. It's sort of like the kind of stitching you see on a seat belt. And that's how I attach the ribbons, just like that. So the slipcover is finished. I'm very excited about that. And now we just need to make the cushion cover. And I am leaving the existing cushion cover on. If you're going to take the cushion cover off, you can actually like dissect it with a seam ripper and use all of the pieces as a template. You can even reuse the zipper and reuse the piping, which I've done all of that before. In this case though, my mom may decide down the road that she would like to use the chair with just the burgundy fabric again. So I'm going to leave that cushion cover on so there are more options in the future. So you do want to think about that when you're slip covering. You might want to leave that existing cushion cover on. When you're upholstering, you could definitely take off the cover and use it as a template. So I've cut out a few pieces of fabric. The first one covers the entire top of the T cushion. That's this style. It has little wings on it that make it like sort of an awkward T. Some cushions don't have these at all. It's just a box. And other cushions, if you're doing a sofa or a love seat, you might have this little wing just on one side or just on the other side. So I've cut a piece of fabric that covers the entire top of the cushion, and then I have all of the piping that I need to go around the top of the cushion and the bottom of the cushion. So I have that cut and done already. And if you missed how to make custom piping, that's in the first video in this series. And then I've cut a piece of fabric that can run around the side, sort of make the side wall of the entire cushion. This is actually two pieces of fabric that we've stitched together to make this long stretch of fabric here. And then the last pieces that I have are for the back, and I actually have, or for the bottom of the cushion, the part that you don't see, and I actually have two pieces for that. And when you put them together, they cover the entire cushion with just a little bit of overlap. And the reason why we've done that is this is how we're going to get the cushion cover on and off. We're not doing a zipper or anything like that. We're just doing a simple envelope closure. And if you wanted to, you could put a couple of buttons or a couple of ties on here. I actually usually just safety pin it because nobody ever sees it. So I don't want to spend a whole ton of time doing a bunch of buttons and stuff when I can just use a couple safety pins. And I have that on a lot of my furniture, and it's held up for years, and it's fine. No one knows. So if you want to use safety pins, you have my permission. That's the Marion method. So when we pin the bottom, we're going to pin these two pieces sort of as one, so that once we sew them together, we'll have this little envelope closure that we can fit the cushion into. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're going to start with the top piece, because that's the piece that's going to be most visible. We want it to look really nice. And you want to make sure that you put the right side of the fabric, or the side that you want to be seen. I think I like that side better. Christy's ironing, if you just heard the steam. It's like whoosh. She's ironing the slipcover so that it looks nice and sharp when we photograph it. Yeah, my mom would have a fit if I gave her a slipcover with a whole bunch of wrinkles in it, because she actually bought me an iron because she was tired of seeing my slipcovers all wrinkled in my pictures on my blog. So, all right, so we're going to start off by pinning the top to the side, and we're going to have the piping in the middle of that as well. Since we have a seam in this fabric, I don't want the seam right in the front of the cushion, so I'm going to position it so we'll have a seam over on the side here and one over here. So I'm going to kind of lay that out the way I want it. And the piping, I want the seam to be in the back. So I'm going to sort of find a good place. And I'm going to start in the middle front. So again, we've got all of the right sides of the fabric are facing the cushion right now. And all of the raw edges are facing in the same direction. And I've sandwiched the piping in between the two layers of fabric, and I'm starting to pin them together into place. So we're using the same pin fitting method that we used to make the slipcover. We're just doing it on the cushion. When you're putting piping around a corner like this, what I do is I like to run the piping so that the edge is sort of sticking straight up, and then allow the fabric to follow that same line. And then this inside fabric here that's the seat, I sort of then fit into that curve, and that gives you nice corners. And then same thing when we go around this corner, I'm going to do the piping first and have this sort of follow along, and then pin it on the inside. This is where the piping like really helps with just making the slipcover look a little bit more tailored. It would definitely be a little bit sloppier if it didn't have the piping to give corners like these some structure. Another important thing too is to make sure that you don't shortcut this corner. You want to make sure that you have the fabric all the way into the corner, because if you try to kind of I don't know, if you kind of miss that curve all the way, then you end up, the slipcover fits a little tight there and it looks a little bit awkward. Sort of like when the arms of a shirt don't fit well. I have a shirt like that right now. I love this shirt, and every time I put it on there, the arms are just like, it's just something about the way they fit is not right. This is where the pieces of fabric come together. So I need to put a seam here. So here's where the edges of the piping meet, and again, I'm just going to let them sort of crisscross and let the ends disappear into this seam here. So I'm going to put a pin on one side of the piping and then put a pin on the other side here. And then we're just going to sew straight across there. So the piping will just sort of, like I said, it'll sort of disappear into the seam. I'm sure there's a better way to do that. That's just how I've always dealt with the piping edges. It's just easy. It looks fine. So if you know a different way, you definitely can do that. And again, I'm going to cut off this excess fabric just to neaten things up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to sew this seam first, and then I'm going to sew all around the piping to attach the top to the sides, and then we'll pin the other side. And I just wanted to show what it looks like where the two pieces of piping meet. So you can see it's very, you know, it looks fine, and I just put it at the back of the cushion. So usually people have a pillow there, so you don't even notice it. So we're going to turn the cushion cover back inside out. And then we're going to pin the other side of the cushion. And this is the one that has two parts to it. So we want to make sure that we put the right sides down first. These have already been hemmed on each side so that they don't come unraveled or anything.
Don't sit up any higher than that.
Okay, well,
yeah, that's perfect.
Like...
Yeah, no. That's perfect.
I'm using some more hemp sacks. They're sheets.
For those of us who don't like to pin, aka lazy people.
That's right. We're lazy people who don't like to pin. And I don't. I want to get it done. No. Like, I want it just done.
I mean, it scares me not to pin, but it does make time go by faster.
Right, you're a pinner.
By default.
My mom would be a pinner. Definitely. Jeff would definitely be a pinner. I am not. With a, just with a, oh gosh, what are those called? Oh, a seam ripper. There you go.